You are not going to leave this table until you sign. My father's voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made the crystal glasses on the dining table seem to vibrate. The scent of fresh pine and expensive red wine filled the room, but beneath it was the metallic tang of fear. Or maybe that was just me. Christmas Eve dinner at the Vance estate was never about family. It was about performance. And tonight, I was the main act. My father, Richard, leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold and unblinking. Beside him, my mother, Cynthia, nervously twisted her pearl necklace, her eyes darting between us like a trapped bird. Across the table, my younger sister Brittany smirked, already tasting her victory. They had set the stage perfectly. The ultimatum was simple. Sign away my rights to the family land trust, the only thing my grandmother had left specifically to me, or leave this house tonight with nothing but the clothes on my back. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was still the failed artist, the disappointment, the daughter who couldn't quite make it in their world of high finance and ruthless ambition. I looked at the document in front of me. It was a quitclaim deed, transferring my ownership of the ancestral land to a holding company controlled by my father. I picked up the pen. Brittany's smirk widened. My mother let out a small, relieved breath. My father actually smiled, a thin, triumphant curving of his lips. They thought I was breaking. They thought I was submitting. I wasn't. I was calculating. I was remembering every insult, every dismissal, every time they had made me feel small so they could feel big. I was remembering the years of eating instant noodles while they dined on steak, the years of building my own empire in the shadows while they flaunted wealth they hadn't earned. I looked my father in the eye. "I'm not signing this," I said, my voice steady, "and I'm not leaving." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb about to detonate. "You will sign it," my father said, his voice dropping an octave. "Or you are no longer my daughter. You are a trespasser, and I will have you removed." He reached for his phone. I didn't flinch. I didn't beg. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding across the polished wood until it hit the centerpiece. "That's not a signature," I said. "That's an eviction notice." Before I tell you what happened next, and why the FBI was swarming the lawn 15 minutes later, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story of justice travels. Have you ever been pushed to the edge by the people who were supposed to protect you? Let me know. Because tonight, we are pushing back. My father stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. "What is this?" he demanded, his hand hovering over the clasp. "Open it," I said. "Or don't. The outcome is the same." He ripped it open. I watched his eyes scan the first page. I saw the exact moment the confusion turned to shock, and then to pure, unadulterated terror. It wasn't the quitclaim deed he had prepared. It was a foreclosure notice. But the name of the lender wasn't a bank. It was Ether Corporation. My company. "You see, Dad," I said, leaning forward and resting my elbows on the table. "You didn't know I founded Ether Corp 5 years ago. While you were telling your friends I was a failed painter living in a studio apartment, I was building one of the largest defense contracting firms in the country. And last month, when your gambling debts became too much for your standard creditors, they sold your bad loans." To me, Brittany laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "You? A CEO? Please. You can't even afford rent. Check your email, Brittany," I said, not taking my eyes off my father. My sister rolled her eyes, pulled out her phone, and tapped the screen. I watched her face. It went from smug to slack, in 3 seconds flat. "You see," I continued, my voice calm and level. "Aether Corp also acquired the boutique financial firm you work for this morning. As the new owner, I ordered an immediate audit. We found the embezzlement. You're fired, Brittany. Effective immediately. And my legal team is already drafting the charges." She dropped her phone. It clattered onto her china plate, cracking the porcelain. My mother made a small, choking sound. "Alexis, what are you doing? This is your family." "No," I said. "This is a business transaction. And you are in default." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the snow falling on the expansive lawn. "This house? It's held by a shell company that was part of the assets I acquired. Under the terms of the corporate housing agreement you signed to hide your assets from the IRS, this property is for employees only. Since I just fired all of you from your respective positions in my subsidiary companies, your right to occupancy has been terminated. You are trespassing." I turned back to face them. They looked like statues, frozen in a tableau of ruin. My father was purple with rage, but he couldn't speak. The papers in his hand were shaking. My mother was weeping silently, ruining her expensive makeup. Brittany looked like she was going to be sick. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. You have 10 minutes to gather your personal effects and leave, I said, checking my watch. Security is already at the gate to escort you off the premises. Don't take anything valuable. It belongs to the company now. I turned my back on them and started to walk toward the door. I felt a surge of triumph, hot and intoxicating. I had won. I had flipped the board. I had taken back everything they had stolen from me, my dignity, my agency, my power. I reached for the door handle, ready to walk out into the cold night air as a free woman. I thought it was over. I was wrong. I had just walked into the real trap. I reached for the heavy brass handle, my fingers inches from cold metal, when a hand slammed against the wood right beside my head. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. I didn't flinch, but I stopped. I turned slowly. My father was standing there, his face flushed a deep, ugly red, his chest heaving. He wasn't the broken man I had seen 10 seconds ago. He was the tyrant I remembered from my childhood, the man who used fear as currency. You think you can just walk out of here? He hissed, leaning in so close I could smell the stale wine on his breath. You think you can destroy this family and just waltz away? I stepped back, creating space. I'm not destroying anything, Richard. I'm repossessing my property. Now move. He didn't move. Instead, he locked the deadbolt. The click echoed in the silent foyer. Trevor, Brittany's fiancé, stepped forward. He adjusted his silk tie, his expression shifting from shock to a predator's calm. The law is funny about possession, Alexis, he said, his voice smooth and practiced. You might own the paper, but possession is 9/10 of the law, and right now, you are on private property, making threats, and behaving erratically. I felt a prickle of warning at the base of my neck. This wasn't just anger. This was a script. They had rehearsed this. What are you talking about? I asked, my muscles tensing. And then the performance began. My mother, who had been weeping into a napkin moments ago, suddenly let out a shriek that could have shattered glass. My necklace! She screamed, clutching her throat. The diamond necklace, it's gone. She looked at me, her eyes wide with feigned horror. She took it. I saw her near the coat rack. She took the heirloom necklace. It was clumsy theater. Desperate and raw. But they committed to it with terrifying intensity. Brittany pointed a shaking finger at me. I saw her too. She put it in her pocket when she came in. I stared at them, fascinated by the sheer audacity. The necklace in question was a vintage piece my grandmother had supposedly left to my mother, insured for $500,000. It was their financial safety net. The one thing they hadn't sold yet. Empty your pockets, my father commanded, holding out his hand. I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. You have got to be kidding me. I'm not playing this game. Trevor pulled out his phone. I'm dialing 911, he announced, his thumb hovering over the screen. Grand larceny. Theft of property valued over $500,000. In this state, that carries a mandatory minimum sentence. Unless, he paused, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Unless you sign that quitclaim deed right now, and maybe transfer those acquisition rights back to your father. We might be persuaded to drop the charges if you show remorse. It hit me then. The true depth of their depravity. This wasn't just a reaction to my eviction notice. They had planned this. They had invited me here tonight not just to bully me into signing, but to frame me if I refused. It was a win-win for them. Either I signed over my inheritance, or I went to prison, and they collected the insurance money on the stolen necklace. My mother lunged forward before I could react, shoving her hand into the deep pocket of my wool coat. I tried to push her away, but my father grabbed my arms, pinning them to my sides. I felt her hand rummage, then withdraw triumphantly. A stream of diamonds dangled from her fist, catching the chandelier light. I found it, she sobbed, turning to Trevor. She stole it. She tried to steal our legacy. I looked at my mother's face. There was no shame there. No hesitation. Only a twisted kind of relief. This is the trap of normalizing cruelty. To them, destroying me wasn't a crime. It was a necessary sacrifice. In their warped reality, I was the villain because I refused to be the victim. They needed me to be the failure, the thief, the bad seed. Because if I wasn't those things, then their own mediocrity was their fault. They had to criminalize my existence to justify their own survival. If sending their own daughter to prison meant they kept their lifestyle for another year, that was just the cost of doing business. Trevor hit the call button on his phone. Officer, I need to report a robbery in progress, he said into the receiver. His eyes locked on mine. We have the perpetrator detained. I stood still, the cold air from the window seeping through the glass. They thought this was the end. They thought the handcuffs were the period at the end of the sentence. They didn't know I had written the whole book. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the people who shared my DNA, feeling the walls of their greed closing in. Trevor was on the phone with the police, his voice calm and authoritative, spinning a narrative of a family betrayed by a thief. My father was guarding the door like a prison warden, but my eyes were fixed on my mother. She was still clutching the diamond necklace, her knuckles white, tears streaming down her face with practiced elegance. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, and as I watched her, the room seemed to tilt, sliding me back 10 years into the past. I was 19. I was standing in the kitchen of our old house, the one they lost before moving into this corporate estate. My mother was sitting at the table, sobbing into her hands, telling me she needed medication for a condition she refused to name. She said it cost $2,000. She said they didn't have it. She said she was in pain. I didn't have $2,000. I had a savings jar with money from waiting tables, intended for art school tuition. It was everything I had. But she was my mother, and she was hurting. So I gave it to her. I handed over my future in a Ziploc bag full of crumpled 20s. She hugged me, told me I was her angel, her savior. 2 days later, I came home early from a double shift. I found my mother and Brittany in the living room. Brittany was twirling in a shimmering prom dress, laughing. My mother was beaming, clapping her hands. "It's perfect, darling," she said. "Worth every penny." I saw the receipt on the table. $2,000. The exact amount of my angel money. She hadn't bought medicine. She had bought a dress for the golden child. When I confronted her, she didn't apologize. She looked at me with cold, dead eyes and said, "Don't be selfish, Alexis. Your sister needs to look the part. You can always work more shifts." They broke me that day. They taught me that my dreams were currency for their vanity. But as I looked at my mother now, 10 years later, holding the necklace she had planted on me, I didn't feel broken. I felt a cold, hard clarity settling in my chest like ice. The girl who gave up her tuition money was gone. The woman standing before them was the CEO of a defense contractor, and she knew exactly how to handle a hostile asset. "Mom," I said, my voice slicing through the theatrical sobbing. "You're really going to do this? You're going to send your own daughter to prison for a grand larceny charge that carries 10 years? Just to keep up appearances?" Cynthia stopped crying instantly. She lowered the necklace, her face smoothing into a mask of stone. "You owe us this, Alexis," she hissed. "We gave you life. If you can't be successful, if you can't bring value to this family, then you can at least be the sacrifice that saves it. We need that insurance money, and we need you out of the way before you ruin Brittany's wedding with your poverty." There it was. The naked truth. I wasn't a person to them. I was a resource. When I had money, they took it. When I had nothing, they tried to harvest me for parts. "You think I owe you my life?" I asked, a dark amusement bubbling up. "You think because you birthed me, you own me? It's a debt you can never repay." My father growled from the door. "Actually," I said, "I think the debt has been settled." I looked at each of them in turn. My father, the tyrant. My mother, the parasite. My sister, the beneficiary. And Trevor, the enforcer. "You spent years draining me dry. You thought the well was bottomless. But you forgot one thing about digging holes, Mother. Eventually, you dig deep enough to hit something hard. Something that doesn't break." I stopped looking at them as family. In that moment, they ceased to be my parents and my sister. They became targets. They became liabilities. And I knew exactly how to liquidate them. Trevor ended the call with a satisfied click of his tongue. "The police are 5 minutes out," he announced, sliding his phone back into his pocket. "And luckily for us, Sheriff Miller is on duty tonight. He and your father go way back. Golf buddies, I believe?" He smirked at Richard, who nodded, the color returning to his face. The fear was gone, replaced by the ugly confidence of men who knew the system was rigged in their favor. They thought they had won. They thought the local badge coming up the driveway was the ultimate authority. I didn't argue. I didn't try to run. I simply backed up until my shoulders touched the cool plaster of the wall. I raised my left wrist. A single tap on the sapphire face of my smartwatch initiated the sequence. The screen pulsed once a silent, digital heartbeat. Aether protocol engaged. It wasn't a panic button. It was a summons. "You can stop checking your watch, Alexis," Brittany sneered, wiping her eyes. "No one is coming to save you. Your little artist friends can't help you now." I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. She was standing in a house she no longer had the right to occupy, wearing clothes bought with embezzled funds, mocking the woman who now owned the debt on her entire existence. "You're right, Brittany," I said, my voice dangerously calm. My friends aren't coming. My security team is. And they don't paint landscapes. Trevor laughed. A dry, barking sound. Your security team? What, a couple of mall cops? Alexis, give it up. You're trying to bluff a room full of sharks. Sheriff Miller isn't going to care about your delusions of grandeur. He's going to see the stolen necklace. He's going to see the deed you tried to force your father to sign. And he's going to cuff you. You're relying on local corruption, Trevor, I said. It's a solid strategy for a DUI or a noise complaint. But you made a mistake. You escalated this to a federal level when you tried to extort a defense contractor. I pushed off the wall and took a step toward them. They flinched instinctively. Let's review the ledger before the sheriff gets here, shall we? I asked, my tone conversational, like we were discussing the weather. 2018. The warehouse fire at your father's distribution center. The insurance payout was $2 million. The fire marshal ruled it accidental. But the forensic accountant I hired found the wire transfer you sent to the arsonist 3 days before the blaze. My father's face went gray. What? He whispered. 2020. I continued, turning to my mother. The Save the Children Gala. You raised $500,000. But the charity you registered? It doesn't exist. The money went into an offshore account in the Caymans. I know. Because I bought the bank that holds the account last week. Cynthia gasped, clutching the necklace tighter. You can't know that. And tonight, I finished, looking at Trevor. Conspiracy to commit kidnapping, false imprisonment, extortion, attempted grand larceny by fraud. I tapped my temple. I'm not just a CEO, Trevor. Aethercorp builds surveillance systems for the Pentagon. Did you really think I walked into a hostile negotiation without a wire? The room went dead silent. The kind of silence that happens when the predator realizes it has bitten into something poisonous. Trevor stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. You're wearing a wire? I'm wearing a fully encrypted, cloud-synced biometric recording device, I corrected. Every word you said, every threat, every admission of the necklace being a setup, it's already been uploaded to a secure server. And it's already been forwarded to the Justice Department. You're lying, Brittany shrieked, her voice cracking. You're just trying to scare us. Dad, she's lying. My father looked at me. For the first time in his life, he didn't see his disappointment. He saw a threat. He saw the end of his world. Sirens grew louder as red and blue lights flickered across the snow-covered windows. I checked my watch. Right on time. Trevor exhaled in relief. It's the sheriff, he said smugly. Doesn't matter what you have. Miller will take your recording. You're finished. He flung the door open. Officer, in here. We caught the thief. I stood still as they smiled at me, convinced help had arrived. They had no idea they'd just sealed their own fate. Sheriff Miller entered, genial and familiar. Richard, he said. Robbery? My father slumped into rehearsed grief. It's my daughter. She stole Cynthia's necklace. We found it on her. Miller turned to me, eyes cold. Is that true? It was planted, I said evenly. And if you arrest me, you'll be aiding federal wire fraud. He scoffed. You got a lawyer mouth. Trevor stepped forward, displaying a video. A woman in my coat, stealing the necklace. A crude, deep fake. Brittany was barely hiding her smile. That's fabricated, I said. Save it for the judge. Miller replied, snapping on the cuffs. My mother sighed theatrically. We just want her to get help, Trevor whispered, triumphant. That device of yours? It'll disappear. With that video, you're done. They glowed with victory. Take her out, my father said. And leak the footage. As Miller dragged me forward, I smiled. You checked the driveway, I said. But not the airspace. The roar hit seconds later. Snow whipped into a vortex as the front door exploded inward. Federal agents, on the ground. Miller dropped instantly. Trevor froze. My parents stared in horror. An FBI agent approached me. Miss Vance. Are you hurt? Just detained. My cuffs were removed. My mother screamed. She's the thief. I picked up the necklace and smashed it on the marble floor. It shattered. Diamonds don't break, I said calmly. Glass does. I produced a bill of sale. You sold the real necklace 6 months ago. I bought it back. It's in Zurich. Trevor collapsed. He understood. You filed a false police report, I continued. Planned insurance fraud. Coordinated it digitally. That's federal wire fraud. And kidnapping. The agent added. We have the audio, my father pleaded. We're your family. I felt nothing. This isn't tragedy, I said. It's surgery. They're all yours. I told the agents. They were let out in cuffs, screaming into the snow. Later, my CFO called. Do you want to acquire the house? I looked at the mansion. A mausoleum. No, I said. Let it burn itself out. The car pulled away. I didn't look back. That night, I didn't lose a family. I survived one. And for the first time in my life, I was free.